Hi, I'm Jayla.
Hi, I'm Coach Sizzle. We're here to empower and educate through stories and enlightening conversations. We've each had our own journey thus far in remembering the power of the womb.
We are ready to expose the unconscious gap in our culture surrounding the childbirth continuum and parenthood. We want to invite you to take this journey with us. Back to the womb. Chapter 1, Our Story. So we wanted to start our podcast by talking about our journey, how we came to know each other, how we came together, and why we're sitting here today. So in my second pregnancy, I decided that I needed a little bit more support. It was the middle of the pandemic. I was likely have borderline hyperemesis, so I was very sick. I was on 2 medications for nausea and still had days that I could not function, could not get out of bed. So in that experience, I came to know that I needed more support for my postpartum journey. My first child was preterm and ended up in the NICU for 5 days postpartum. So we had that in the back of our mind, my husband and I. We had that in the back of our mind that this could also happen again, and that we also had a toddler that was 3 during this time that was another piece to the pie. So we decided to explore postpartum doulas and extra help. So I think I found you through Facebook.
Wonderful.
I think that's how I found you. I was just in an exploratory phase and reached out, and you and I had an initial call together. And in that call, we really explored what my goals were with my postpartum and what you could offer. And through that call, I was so grounded and just reminded of exactly what I needed, and realized that I did need a postpartum doula, and I was hopeful that it was going to be Susanna, because in our conversation we connected so strongly. We were on the same page. We just clicked, I think.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Totally. Yes. And I would love to share my perspective of our initial call together and the overall experience, because you were interested in all of my offerings, like my signature program. Mm-hmm. And I had created it like 6 months before. Mm-hmm. But the first client to really show that interest, and I would call it like soul client.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that I started doing a soul marketing ritual the fall that I met you. And so we connected right before Thanksgiving of 2020, right in the middle of all of that. And then we started working together that December through February, March, and beyond, right? So the way that I felt was very aligned. Like, this is happening in my business. This is possible. I want to offer all of these things, which we'll discuss more, like, to this family, and devote all of my time towards them. Because in the past, I had been working for multiple families and knew the amount of work that it takes energetically and physically. And so when I found you, it was like taking a deep breath, like, wow, they really want my signature offering and are willing to invest $10,000. And I really am open to receiving that for my business, for myself. And it was like just feeling so relieved that I got them and they got me. We're going to do this together for this child that's coming into the world and for this family that's growing. And it felt so like much expansion in my business and life. And,
yes.
And now I know, like, when clients invest in a higher level, they're going to get a bigger transformation because it's a commitment not only of the investment, but what they're able to receive and opening themselves up to that profound healing of what I offer in the mind, body, spirit, coming into motherhood, coming into parenthood, like such a transformational opportunity that you and Jake both were like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah. I remember getting off of our first call and feeling like I had found what I had envisioned. Because for me, it was, I didn't just need the meals. I didn't just need someone to play with my 3-year-old. I needed spiritual support. I had felt after my first son that you're just flying by the seat of your pants. And you don't know what to expect with your first child. And there's this tendency for mamas to almost like not upfront want to do the research and want to understand what's going to happen afterwards because of the fear. They're a little bit afraid. They're unsure. This is a big deal. This is their first time. And so you almost don't want to know all of the things. And with my first, that was definitely my experience. I was like, I'm going to figure it out as we go. I'm just going to take it as it comes. And what that causes is this survival mode. You go into survival mode, and every couple does it. Every parent does it when their baby comes into this world. You are surviving. You're personally keeping yourself alive. You're trying to keep your baby alive. Everyone fed and bathed and sleeping as much as you possibly can that first year. You are in survival mode. And something that we talked about in our first call was I straight up said, I want to thrive, not just survive. And that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about these things. That's why we have a mission to come back to the womb, come back to a woman's spirituality, to her gut instinct, to her inner divinity prior to the baby coming into the world. Because when you have that foundation, the experience changes profoundly. And when you don't, you just survive. And don't get me wrong, there is just a level of survival that happens with a child no matter what. Like, I'm not talking about rainbows and unicorns right now. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's still going to be really hard. It's still going to be this incredible challenge for you and your partner and your family and yourself personally and your partner personally. There's no denying that. But when you have that spiritual foundation to come back to and the support to lean on from those first 40 days, something changes in your experience in that first year and even in the first couple years when it really is the hardest and it's a grind.
Yeah, well, and in my business, Positive Postpartum, that's what I've been studying. I mean, for the past 6 years that I've been a postpartum doula, getting clinical experience in people's homes, but also like my whole career studying child development, the continuum, and leading into this time in a woman's life and a man's life and how profound it is. And as we are becoming more connected with technology and just open to receiving this wisdom of traditions around the world and how they live and how they handle their postpartum and the Ayurvedic belief and tradition of the first 40 days, equals the 40 years. So I had the opportunity with you to really wire your brain for oxytocin and not so much cortisol. There were cortisol spikes, of course, but you had a foundation. You had food in the fridge to feed your soul and nurture your elements in the body. A lot of what I do is based on Ayurveda, which is balancing the elements in the body and harmonizing and not looking at anything that has disease, but it's more of an imbalance. That nutrition and the food that you eat is your medicine.
Yep.
And so I love, I've heard this phrase, it's like the barn doors fly off and they never come back.
Yes.
Motherhood. And you spoke a little bit about that, like just going at the root of your pants, right? Like just going for it. And I see families that do that, you know, and then I learn from them because I have been a nanny for 16 years. So I've heard the stories. Oh, well, when they just got home, I blocked out the first 3 months of my life or with the baby,
Their life, yeah.
you know, because they were so fatigued. And so I'm getting all of this like witnessing and I bring it into my craft and create it as an entrepreneur. And that drive comes from somewhere I don't even have control of. It's very deep and ancestral, and I feel like I'm in a lineage of midwives and mermaids and divine priestess work. Like when we speak about lost feminine art, you know, of not only postpartum but childbirth and how that can be the same way, cortisol or oxytocin,
Right.
priming the brain
Yeah.
and the nervous system.
Yeah. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that in our society. We don't talk about focusing on the oxytocin versus the cortisol. Some people don't even know what that is. Yeah.
So these are hormones that are setting up for stress or love, fear or love, right? It's all a feeling in the body, and it's all interconnected with the hormones, the brain, the thyroid, the adrenals, the endocrine system, the liver. I mean, it's all connected. And so anytime in our life where we go through a transition, whether it's moving or a new job or a new relationship, hello, what's your baby? This is the most profound new relationship that now you have the opportunity to really craft and create and raise.
A baby.
It's radical responsibility in this day and age to do it in a wholesome way where it is creating a spiritual foundation. I think that's what's been lost.
Yes.
Is this spiritual connection to the body, to Mother Nature. And when we connected, we had so much potential at the very start to like craft and create. And here we are now creating our podcast. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank
for
you, everyone.
receiving like what I've created and it's such a blessing to really connect. What, Gavin is 14 months? 14, 15, about 16 months later.
Wow.
Your transformation. I mean, I helped you prime your brain for like
This.
Yeah. This like, you are unstoppable. You are a divine mother that birthed children into this world. Like, you are a goddess.
Yeah.
And I treated you as such. And it's like, now you're joining the goddesses. Right? All the goddesses come together. We have to bring all the goddesses together. And it's such a, it's a surrender to this great knowing. Like you said, not wanting to know everything at the very beginning, right? So for whatever reason in this lifetime, I have the capacity to really want to know. And one of the reasons why I don't have my own children yet is because of my own belief about my own strong foundation, right? And so releasing fear around that and trusting the divine process and all of these things.
Yeah.
But it can be scary to open yourself up to
All of it.
All of it when it comes to having a baby.
Well, it's not the norm in our society. The norm in our society is not, let's go inside, let's meditate on that, let's explore that spirituality, let's go there. That's not the norm. That's not where people, that's not their first instinct to go, is to, let me just meditate about that for a minute. Some spiritual people, they'll pray on that. That's something that I think religion gives a good foundation for. But, I think that it goes a little bit deeper than that. It goes into that trusting of your inner self, your center, your
facing yourself.
And facing yourself. Oh, facing yourself.
Facing yourself, even just as
the ultimate work of life is facing yourself.
Yeah. Feeling the feelings.
So ultimately, we ended up hiring Susanna for our spiritual journey with Gavin. I made it into the new year. So his due date was January 27th, and we made it to January 4th. We made it full term to 36 weeks and 4 days. And Susanna was a huge part of that process. So we connected at Thanksgiving, and then we hired Susanna, and she started right away. She started working her magic right away. We did Reiki sessions while I was pregnant, and we put together our plan of what I needed most, what offerings she was going to provide on top of all of the things that we had talked about spirituality-wise. So Gavin decided to come on in a morning, and I went into labor in the middle of the night, which is exactly what happened with my first son. That was quite familiar, which was nice. We knew that as things progressed that we needed to get to the hospital. We decided to have a hospital birth, so that's worth noting as well. We found a hospital here in Denver that has a birth center and a labor and delivery and an OR all on the same floor, so that felt aligned to what Jake and I wanted. So that was at Rose Medical Center here in Denver, and my OB, which again we decided to do an OB versus a midwife. My OB's office was across the street from the hospital, so one call away, one short crossing the street away, was my OB. So went into labor in the middle of the night, and by 2 a.m. I had a feeling that this felt very similar to my first, and that we needed to get to the hospital. So headed to the hospital in the middle of the night. I think there was a storm that was supposed to be coming, so like a snowstorm was coming, and there were 3 of us in the waiting room, in the triage room, all just like very, very pregnant and ready to go. So the lady at the front desk actually said, she made the comment, yep, the storm's coming, so all the babies are coming now. So that seems to be energetically just a thing that happens. So we get there, we get triaged, and I'm, starting to feel it, starting to feel really strong. I had an unmedicated birth with my first, and I wanted to try again for my second. We hired a doula, actually, not Susanna. We did not hire, we hired a birth doula for the actual birth. So in the process, we called her. She was on her way to the hospital as well. So by about 5 a.m., I was in the triage room and getting checked out. And in that process, started to really feel the birth pains. And I knew that it was getting more intense. So she checked me, and I think I was at like 3 centimeters or something, and she said, "This is your second. Usually mamas with their second will stay at 3 for days. So we're probably going to send you home." So I was like, okay. But I also knew in my gut that things were getting a little more intense than me wanting to go home. Like I thought to myself, I don't want to go home. I had that thought in my head. I said, something in me said, I don't want to go home. And I remember getting out of the bed. So, you got the things around you, and I, kind of took the stuff off for a second, and I walked to the bathroom, and I sat down, and I was like, I had another contraction there, and I was just like, no, I'm not going home. I'm in labor, and I knew it. I knew it in my bones. And so I got back on the table, and within the time that she said, we're probably going to send you home, and the time that I needed to get up and go to the restroom, it was about 30 minutes. And when I got back on the table and she came back in and she said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I want you to check me again." And she said, "Okay." And so she checked me again, and I was at a 6. So in 30 minutes, I had gone from a 3 to a 6. And I just knew. I knew when I got up, and the pain was different, and the pressure was different. And so I just had to listen to that. So she checked me again. I'm at a 6, and she's like, "Oh, okay. We need to admit you." And I was like, okay, great. Because again, I had that gut feeling. So we got admitted to room 4. I'll never forget this, room 4 on January 4th. I was like, well, that's fitting. I saw the number on the, the side of it. I was like, yes, this is my baby, he's coming. So, got admitted. And what's really interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in future episodes, but what's really interesting, when I walked into the room, and it's worth noting, they had everything laid out for the epidural already. So everything, they had the tray, the rolling tray with all the things, and I saw all the stuff.
I remember you telling me this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, whoa.
The expectation.
Yeah. I was like, whoa.
And it's not a good or bad thing, but it's just like being prepared. But
yeah,
for a mama in labor, like the vulnerability of her mind and where she goes and planting seeds, it's just like the medical establishment doesn't understand that, projection happening during that trance of childbirth, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So, yeah, and I'm like walking myself, I'm walking myself, my husband's carrying bags, it's a very weird situation, to be honest,
because you're tripping basically into this birth realm.
Yes, exactly. And then I walk in and I see this tray of, I saw the like long needle, and I saw it all. And so I was like, I turned my head and I walked straight to the bed, and I was like, I'm going to focus on the bed. And then, and I'm still in labor, like I'm still having contractions, and they're getting intense. And I think Jake checked in with our doula, and he was like, she's almost here. And I was like, okay, great. And I had a few contractions once they got me, in the bed with all the things. And that's another thing worth noting as well. When you do have a hospital birth, there's a lot of stuff on your body. Like, you are very overtouched, but not by human hands, not in this like comfort, safe, I'll say safe way. It's very like stretchy bands and monitors and lots of beeping sounds. And so again, to note on that you're so vulnerable, and you are trying you really are trying to get into a birth trance and into, a breathing pattern, or, if you do hypnobirthing, you're trying to get into your affirmations and things like that. So it's very disruptive. It's very disruptive. And so, that's why I focused on the bed, and I was like, okay, how do I make this bed comfortable for me right now? What do I need? And I was very in tune with like, what does my body need right now? And I knew I needed to lay down. I knew I needed to be on this, my left side, because that's the only side that I was the most comfortable with. I mean, I still had heartburn. I was still nauseous. I still had all those things going on. So I needed to be as comfortable as possible. And I didn't do that with my first birth. I didn't know to do that. So, I get hooked up. I get to my side, and I start, really just trying to dive into the contractions and into the flow. And then my doula got there, which was a huge piece of the pie. So she gets there and she gets into her go mode, and she starts pressure points right away. She starts analyzing where I'm at, talking to the nurses, talking to Jake, talking to me. So
it allowed you to get into that birth trance.
Yes.
Stay there.
Yes.
So you could have this baby.
Yep. She just absolutely pulled me back into myself, which was exactly what I needed in the moment. So once I was there, I remember having a few contractions, and she did the pressure points, and I was like, wait, did I have a contraction? So if you're considering a doula, or thinking about, I don't know if get the doula. Get the doula, if not for anything but the pressure points that they know that relieve the pain. Because I ultimately went through probably 3 or 4 contractions without even feeling them when she first started to kind of like work with me. So she's there, and I get into a good rhythm. And then she suggested that maybe for this next phase, because I was in a good place, she's like, would you like to get into the bathtub? So I was like, yes, that sounds awesome. So I got into the bathtub, and in another, I don't know how much time passed. I don't know how long I was in the bathtub. But I did have more contractions that I ultimately, I felt, but they weren't as strong as I had previously had them, like on the way to the hospital or getting triaged. So I knew that was helping as well, because I was in the bathtub, hardly feeling contractions, but I knew I was still contracting. So once I got to a certain point in the bathtub, I was like, okay, I think I kind of just started to feel a little bit more primal, and I was like, I need to get back in bed. Like I don't want to have to move again. That was what I was thinking in my head. Like, I don't want to move again. I don't want to have to turn over. I don't want to have to, I was just like, I need to get in my spot. And so we went back to bed, and by this point the doctor had come in and was like, let's check you. So we checked again, and I don't remember where I was at centimeter wise when she checked me, and that was at 7:30 in the morning. So at 7:30 she checked me, and she said, your water still hasn't broken, but if I break your water, like, shit's gonna hit the fan, and like you're gonna have this baby quick. And I was like, let's do it. Like, I was in my, like, I was already in my trance. I was feeling good. I was feeling confident. I had my doula there. My husband was, taken care of, like, emotionally too. I felt really strong. I felt really supported, and I was like, let's do it. So she broke my water, and lo and behold, shit got cray. Okay. It got real. Yeah, and that's when, and I think that kind of pushed me into transition, which, pushed into the last part of labor. And my doula was incredible. She was in my ear the whole time, not like weird, like creepy whispering, it's just not creepy. She was in my ear like, you got this. another contraction down. You're closer to meeting your baby. You're that much closer to meeting your baby. Your baby's coming. And it was very encouraging, and it was safe. And it's like she also knew my body. It was really strange. Like, and she did. I mean, that's their job, is to know birth and read women's bodies as they're going through it. So,
and how the baby is traveling through the pelvis.
Yes.
So I'd like to hear about your transition, and if you took a break before pushing, or if you just you did, because I hear about that all the time. And at the time, I wasn't trained to be a birth doula, but since then, I took a midwifery training with my elder Wapio, which will come up more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I got out of, once my water was broken, that just set everything further, and things got more intense. My contractions got much more intense. Pressure points were no longer working the way that they were before. I was definitely feeling my labor. And then it became a mind game. And I'm so grateful for the way that she was with me. She was with me, like I said, very much like close to my head. She was, like kind of brushing my hair back and kind of touching me in a very motherly kind of way. And, and Jake was with his masculinity, like, pushing on the pressure points when he could. And so it was like this beautiful juxtaposition of like that feminine touch from the doula, and then Jake's masculinity, like, doing the strength things that needed to happen. And it was this beautiful, this beautiful dance. And I vividly remember getting to this point where I was like, oh my goodness, my voice was getting really high. Like I was getting into screaming type tones, and she whispered in my ear,
bring it down
into
the womb.
Yes. And she said, bring it down, moan deeper, and I did. And it totally changed the tone of my mind. It was really beautiful. And so she coached me into and then through the hardest part of my labor. Like I remember having a moment where I had like a flashback of, if anyone's done the incline in Colorado Springs, where you're like, when you look up at it, you're like, oh, what did I do? Why am I here? What am I doing? And you have to go up, right? Like you have to go up the incline. So I had this moment of like, I have to go through this. Like I have to go up through this experience. I cannot circumvent it. I chose this. I wanted the unmedicated. This was my choice, so I had that moment, and she helped me through that mentally. She helped me, pull my voice down, pull my tone down. And, things started to move. And I remember the tone of my voice changing from, like a moan into like a grunt. And that was when I was ready to push. It was like my body just knew when it was time to push. So it went from, to like, that like, that like visceral grunting of like, okay, it's time to push. So got to that point slowly but surely, step by step. I don't feel like I was pushing too long. I don't know how long I was pushing, but
it doesn't matter.
No. I do think that it maybe was rushed a little bit. I felt like, because once the doctors come in, it's very much like they start to get on like numbers and scales and like they're very like obsessive over number of breaths or things like that. And I remember kind of feeling
mechanical. It sounds,
yes, very mechanical. And I remember thinking like, I'm not ready for that yet. Or so, you know, I just remember thinking like, oh, that doesn't really align right now. And so I just kept kind of doing my own thing. Like I was so in my own trance. So yeah, I pushed for however long it was. I don't know.
Those magical hours.
Yes, those magical hours.
Minutes, seconds.
So, you know, doctor broke the water at 7:30 and Gavin made his appearance at 9:25. So it was 2 hours later.
Yes.
So that is how Gavin came into the world.
Yes. And there were so many moments there where I just heard so much strength and power in not only your mind, but your body, and a lot of your mind, though. I mean, to walk into the hospital when a natural birth and just setting yourself up with the support that you needed and the head game. I love the idea of climbing the mountain, and we can speak more about that in the holistic stages of birth, of climbing the mountain, and at the top at transition, you gather everything you need for that baby before pushing him out, and to not rush her when she is at that fully open state, and letting her be on her own terms is so powerful for the going into motherhood. Yeah. Knowing how to parent her baby.
Yes.
So I love your birth story. You shared with me your video. It's so powerful, amazing, brought tears to my eyes like they all do. Yeah. And congratulations, you did it.
So you know, we were in the hospital for 3 days after, and that felt really supportive. There's lots of other things that go on when you're in the hospital. We can again get to that in other episodes, but you know, it's kind of own journey in itself. And then I knew in hiring Susanna that I wanted you to be at the house when we came home. I knew I wanted that. I wanted you to be in my kitchen making me something and ready for me, and have my home ready for me. So, you know, we had talked about having a little station in the bedroom. We had talked about having a little station in the living room. And so, you know, I called you when we were on our way home. You made your way. We all kind of convened right at the same time at home. And Susanna got to actually be a part of us introducing our son to the baby.
Yes.
First son too. So that was a beautiful process. Yes. It was a little scary.
Really?
It's a little scary because, you know, you have this incredible heart and love and foundation with your first, and then when you bring home another, and you know that it's going to disrupt that, it's a little scary. And I remember like my stomach being kind of in knots, and Jake and I like holding hands on the way home, and we had the other baby, and we were flashing back to bringing, you know, we had the same drive, we had the same car, we had the same car seat, you know, so it was very, very strange. It was this just
like, here we go again.
Twilight Zone moment.
Times
like,
a million.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was very emotional. And so Jake and I were holding hands, we're crying, we're nervous. So Susanna was there when we brought Gavin home, and she was there to help support Eli. My father-in-law was also there, my sister-in-law, my husband's sister. So that process was almost an entire day. I mean, I think we got home around noon, and you didn't leave until probably like 4 or 5.
Right.
That day.
Just helping you settle in, and also that emotional support, even if there's no words involved, but like holding the energy in the space to be peaceful and safe and calm, right? Getting Eli to sit down and be calm.
Getting Eli to sit down. What is that?
Yes. So putting those words together and offering some warm broth, bone broth, to really ground and nourish this beautiful moment. I always offer the meat at the house with the family so that I can welcome them into their home, sheets pulled down, robes ready. I mean, let's get comfortable.
Yes.
And so you took it up. You took me up on it.
Hell yeah.
And so very much felt like a fly on the wall, but maybe more of like a butterfly.
Yes, I love that.
Because it was very much your family moment.
It was.
And with Jake's sister and his dad, and you all bringing the baby in. And so working in the background and just witnessing that is definitely a huge moment in the sacredness of the work I do with families. And being a part of it is such a... So I'm so grateful, to be a part of these families' lives in such vulnerable times and be able to help support that, you know.
Well, and I mean, that was the start of our true journey together. Like we really connected in that first call, and then we connected with the Reiki session before Gavin was born. But that day was like, that was the start of our relationship, truly, because you were there in such an amazing, huge, monumental time, an event in our life, and you were so supportive. Like, you had brought your meals that you had prepared for me that week. You immediately got bone broth on the stove. You, like you said,
congratulating everyone in the room.
Yes, just that,
and just holding that space.
Yes.
Of celebration, and it's also done in a way that it's like ceremony, and that's why it's imprinted in the brain, like setting yourself up from the start to thrive with this baby. So that was the start of our journey together, and as that continued, I mean, there were amazing days where you would show up in the morning, we would make breakfast, we would talk, we would hang out with baby. And then in the afternoon, we would do massage, Reiki, end the day with that. So it comes, brings me back down out of my, cortisol, anything cortisol going on, any difficult situations with the baby, things like that. It pulled me out of that nervous system overdrive, which is so key during that time, because there's so many triggers. The hormones are changing and your life has changed, and especially if you have another child in the house, their nervous system is all out of whack. They're learning how to handle all of this as well. So there's so many factors that those days that you were with me, we got to connect and talk and move through stuff that was coming up for me and Jake, and you were support for Jake as well. I mean, I remember having conversations with the three of us in the kitchen, with Gavin, you holding Gavin, or me holding Gavin, or him in the bassinet or whatever, but he was still in the room, and we're working through stuff that's coming up, things, worries, concerns, just anything that was kind of throwing Jake and I off a little bit. You helped us come back to center, and that's the support that doulas provide. Good doulas provide postpartum, is that center, coming back to center, because there's so many things that as a new mama, regardless of if it's your first or your fifth, it's still a new child. It's still a new soul in the house that changes everything. So those were the supports that really helped move me into that thrive versus survive, because those days I was able to process a lot of things that were happening that I don't know what we would have done without you, truly. I mean, there was situations that came up between Jake and I. There were situations that came up between family. There were, I mean, we were still in the middle of, COVID stuff that was really tough and hard, and family situations were tricky during that time. And it was just, you were just that breath of fresh air for me, and that support. So yeah, those were just a few of the many pieces of your services that
completely changed
Your life.
my life. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And it was so much fun, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was a lot of work. The meals, so I was providing, 4 or 5 meals plus snacks and 2 beverages. And then I would cook for you while I was there. It was very much like wearing many hats: therapist, chef, masseuse, facilitator, ceremonialist. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
But again, going back to that Ayurveda and that harmony in the body through the food and the support and just re-harmonizing.
Yep.
Right? During this time of huge transition, being that you're recovering from pregnancy, this really hard pregnancy on your body, and the childbirth.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is like that transformational opportunity to, it won't make or break you, but it's going to rewire your brain. And this is a serious thing.
Yes.
This is like compared to adolescent, but on steroids. Each time you go through pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum with that baby is asking you to grow.
Yes.
And rewire
change.
yourself for the better. Because you brought me here, and we're going to do this work together.
Yeah.
And I remember, just coaching and guiding you on the infant development, right?
Yes.
And his day by day, checking in with him on his latch and his poop and his little baby gut and his cries and
yes.
I mean, just holding that fairy godmother energy, towards the children, because that's where I have just 16 years as a nanny, 6 years as a doula. I've worked with so many children even outside of family homes. So my ability to care for the children and then mother the father. And I'll never forget the time where your family was able to figure things out and come to visit you, and I still came over and listening to you and your mom and Gavin and your conversations about birth, which I facilitated as far as asking, do you know your mom's birth story? And just for Gavin to be able to soak up this ancestral, this heritage of where he comes from and his own mom's womb and the womb of his mom's mom. And it's just profound.
It's huge.
Again, transformation.
Yeah.
And that really just stuck out because your mom was receiving so much healing.
Yeah.
From me being in the room with you all,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Gavin would sit with Grandma, and we would go do our yoni steams or our Reiki, and and it was all good. And then I would always lie you down for a nap or want you to be lying down on my way out, because of course we're moving a lot of energy during this vulnerable state of literally the womb and the cervix coming back down into its normal size, which takes 6 weeks. So again, that is such a vulnerable time of you being open.
Yes.
So whatever you're putting in, literally, is going to be...
I don't think my gut has been as healthy as it was in those 6 weeks you were cooking for me. I think about that all the time. I'm like, can I get Susanna to do a 6-week reset for me?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, but truly, when I make the foods that that you made for me now, they're so simple, and we complicate our food so much right now in our society. It's inspirational, and don't get me wrong, I love me some Food Network, but it gets a little crazy. But I will never forget the way that my body felt in those first 6 weeks, because the food I was eating was simple. It was easy to digest. It was anti-inflammatory. It was warm. It was the dead of winter. I would have been freezing my tush off if I didn't have those things to go to, and I would have been eating, I still would have been eating okay, especially when my mom was there, but I still would have been eating tacos and, an Asian stir fry and I don't know, just whatever anyone decided that they want to bring. I remember in our first conversation we talked about after my first birth, I'll never forget all of the people, like most people brought us food that was like finger food. And I remember always having to wash my hands like 17 times a day because I would be eating something that somebody had brought for us, but it was like pizza or, you know, my like ribs. Like I remember someone brought us like them, but like ribs when you're trying to hold like the sauce and it's just like it just doesn't work. Like you need something that's scoop it up, take a bite, and move on. You know, it just there was that synergy of the type of food just in itself was so healing. So
yes, and I put together that meal plan based on Ayurveda. So I'm a part of the Newborn Mothers Collective based out of Australia with Julia Jones, and I learned postpartum cooking from her, and it's all centered around balancing the elements, right?
Amazing.
And so postpartum, you had a lot of space in your body and a lot of air, and so we want things that are going to ground you and warm you, create more fire in the digestion.
Yep.
And in the body, this warmth. So yes, there's a science to all of this, and that is what Ayurveda is, the science of life. So by studying Ayurveda in the postpartum childbirth continuum realm, that's where I gained most of my wisdom, and I was able to practice what I preach, and I love that meal plan. I mean, I plan to use it, right? Like it works.
It works. Yeah. Okay, so I think I would love to just give each other a little love here and kind of reconnect as we finish up our first conversation together. I see so much in you, and you inspire me because you are so driven. You are true to your word. You stay focused, but not... I don't want to say obsessive way. It's a way of life, and you move forward in your life and you follow your intuition. And I have been in periods of my life where I have not done that, and your drive has inspired me so much to just follow my divine power because you have, and I've gotten to see how that divine power and that truth has affected my life.
Beautiful.
And that's what I see in you, is that true inspiration, and why I wanted to work with you, why you pull me in every single time that we talk, why we're here today.
Well, I would love to share and give you some love on all the love pouring out of you into this world, you know, especially into your family, and this aware mother, you know, that you've become through your experiences, and that what your children have taught you, and you're like so open to learning and growing, and just so intelligent and smart. And that intuition is like in all of us, right? I just gave you the opportunity to really like coach you into it and your own belief in that vulnerable state of that childbirth and postpartum. And so you're like so open-minded, you know, and conscious of yourself as a mother, and that now you like want to feel that within Jayla, you know, within yourself as a woman. And so I'm like so honored, you know, and inspired by our friendship, and that I got to witness you during that time, and I'm excited for you to be able to witness me during my own experience, you know, of the initiation into motherhood, this huge rite of passage. And I think it's just a beautiful example of like when you're open to receiving the love and the support that like you're worthy of by a professional, or just by setting yourself up to be coached and guided and mentored to what's possible for your family. You know, we've both gone through an awakening process through our relationship, and so I just see so much more of that within us, this awakening, and now we want to share our story and continue the conversation so that we can help others.
Yeah.
Prevent things that we've learned.
Yeah. There's a huge missing piece to women being taken care of during preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum. And to bring it back to the womb here, that's why we're here. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we started this. We want to share some of these conversations. We want to share some of these experiences, and in the hopes that we can inspire women to come back to their divine power. We have so much in us that is untapped, and there's a huge gap in the conversation, and we want to fill a little bit of that gap.
Yes.
So that's why we're here.
Yes, and empowering women by reminding them of this divine power.
Yes.
And I remember doing that with you during a massage session, and you were like probably 15 days postpartum, and you had such a huge release of tears for all the other women in your, not only in your heritage and lineage, but for the women in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they didn't have this support.
Yeah.
And so I saw that as such a huge ancestral healing moment for you. So we want to empower women to come back to the womb.
Yep.
Yay! Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you received powerful insight and inspiration. We encourage you to reach out because we know it takes a village, and we are here for you.
Connect with us on YouTube, Back to the Womb, Apple Podcasts, and Instagram at Coach Sizzle Conscious Living. Check out the show notes at positivepostpartum.org/Back to the Womb podcast for additional information that may have been discussed in this episode. And remember, you hold the power.